Hi, yeah, welcome back. It's Faith Talk. Um, Next caller. Go ahead.
Pronto? 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 Pronto?
ho ho! 黄金バト私はイーグルブレーンです。あなたをクロスえへへへへへえ、何よ
That's news for today. We'll see you next time.
Before we proceed to the next battery of rituals, it would probably be wise to closely examine some of the signs, symbols, and gestures we will use in these rituals. First and foremost being the various pentagrams, which we have already briefly discussed while preparing for the lesser banishing ritual. Although all the various pentagrams were shown and described in chapter 28, it was done rather quickly, more to put the Banishing Earth pentagram in context, so as to explain why that particular pentagram needs to be drawn that particular way. As previously mentioned, the easiest way to remember this is to imagine the World card, or the Wheel of Fortune card, as standing in front of you. The four angelic animals representing the various elements of the fixed signs of the zodiac. The cow for Taurus and Earth, the human for Aquarius and Air, the eagle for Scorpio and Water, and the lion for Leo and Fire. From this pattern, we can extrapolate the values of the various lines of the pentagram and attribute them as well. The leftmost vertical line being the earth line, the rightmost being the fire line. The horizontal line is the air-water line, and the two diagonal lines at the bottom being the spirit lines. To invoke any of the following energies, it is proper to use the elemental weapon of that element as the wand while constructing the pentagram. For Earth, taking the pentacle, start at the top point and come down the earth line to the earth corner and continue underneath, going around until you finish the shape. For air, take the sword and starting at the water point of the air line, move across to the air point and continue down and around to complete the shape. For water, take the cup, starting at the air point of the air-water line, move across to the water point, and continue down and around to complete the shape. For fire, taking the wand, start at the top point of the fire line, move down to the fire point, and continue underneath, going around until the shape is complete. To invoke Spirit Passive, using the wand, hand, or brazier, begin at the earth corner and go up the Spirit Passive line to the water corner, going around to complete the shape. To invoke Spirit Active, start at the fire corner and proceed up the active spirit line to the air corner, then going around to complete the shape. For the banishings of these elements, one only requires the sword, which is the weapon of banishing. To banish earth, starting at the earth corner, move up the earth line to the top point, then continuing down and around the shape. For air, start at the air point and move across the air-water line to the water point, continuing around to complete the shape. For water, start at the water point and proceed across the air-water line to the air point. And for fire, start at the fire point and move up the fire line to the top point. For Spirit Passive, start at the water corner of the Spirit Passive line and proceed down to the earth corner, then going up and over until coming around to complete the shape. And for Spirit Active, start at the air corner of the Spirit Active line and proceed down to the fire corner, continuing up and around until the shape is complete. Do remember that the air and water pentagrams are linked in that they invoke and banish each other. To invoke water is to banish air, to invoke air is to banish water. Also, if you intend to practice performing any of these pentagrams, especially those of invocation, it may be wise to perform a lesser banishing ritual afterwards to avoid accidentally invoking any unintended energies. Apart from the pentagrams, there are several magical gestures, many of which we have already discussed in the Solomonic Philemedon fusion tradition, which can stand alone as potent projectors of force, be used in sets as standalone rituals, or be incorporated and sewn into larger rituals and ceremonies accordingly to their symbolic power. These are collectively referred to as the grade signs, coming under 4 major headings. The neophyte signs in grade 0, the Enterer, also called the sign of projection, and the sign of silence or Harpocrates. Then there are the elemental grades. 1-10, the neophyte, set, fighting. 2-9, the Zelator, shoe supporting the sky. 3-8, the Practicus, water, the sign of Oromoth. 4-7, the Philosophus, fire, the sign of Thum-Aeth-Nith. And in the Dominus Liminis grade, representing the fifth element of the spirit, there are the signs of rending and of closing the veil. In the grade of 5-6 Adeptus Minor are introduced the Lux signs, the sign of Osiris slain, Isis mourning, Apophis and Typhon, and Osiris risen. Finally, we come to the Nox signs. In 6-5, the Adeptus Major, the sign of Horus and Mintu. 7-4, the Adeptus Exemptus, the sign of Pan and Bacchus. In the grade of Babe of the Abyss are two signs similar to the Dominus Liminis, the signs of Chastity and the sign of Babylon. The final sign is 8-3, the Magister Templi, Isis rejoicing, Mother triumphant, the sign of Isis holding the baby Horus. In addition to these poses, the system also makes use of several smaller hand gestures such as the sword hand, figure hand, and sign of benediction. There are, however, other mudram one may consider incorporating into their practice for more subtle tuning of the fine energies, such as those appearing in the Kuji-in or the magical hand numbers of dactylonomy. There are also many Masonic poses that exist as well, including the secret handshakes, as well as Bulwer's chirologia of natural Italian hand signs, which one may choose to learn about and incorporate into their work if so desired.
Has the demonic software program been completed?
Yes, I have seen to it. The demonic software is compatible with the man-made communication network system. When interlocked, we can use it to transmit ourselves all over the world. Awaken.
The next set of symbolic tools we must discuss are the elemental hexagrams, which in my opinion are the most difficult to remember. Unlike the elemental pentagrams, which are terrestrial and use the classical terrestrial attributions for the directions, the elemental hexagrams are celestial, using the elemental attributions of the zodiac, with Aries, fire in the east, Capricorn, earth in the south, Libra, air in the west, and Cancer, water in the north. It therefore calibrates your magical clock to the dawn of the equinox, much like how the LBRP calibrates your magical compass to the center of the universe. These hexagrams are composed of 2 triangles each. However, these triangles are not arranged as the typical Star of David, with the exception of Earth. The hexagram of fire is similar to the alchemical symbol for fire, which you are probably already familiar with. The shape of the water hexagram could be easily remembered by its similarity to the cup from the suit of the tarot. The air hexagram, similarly, could be seen as looking like the blade of a sword. And the hexagram of Earth, which is the same as the hexagram of Saturn, which we will discuss later, is the same emblem present on the pentacle of the Golden Dawn, which is the symbolic weapon of Earth. The next set of tools in our arsenal of somatic magical components are the traditional planetary hexagrams, which are for the most part based on a very simple set of rules and attributions with which you are probably already familiar. The attributions, of course, are based on the Tree of Life attributions to the planets in the Thelema Dawn fusion tradition. The section of the Tree of Life that is attributable to the 7 classical planets would be visualized as being in front of you, starting with Saturn at the top and proceeding in the order of Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, and Moon. To invoke any planet whatsoever, start at the point of the hexagram attributed to that planet and trace the first triangle in a clockwise direction. Then, beginning the second triangle at the point opposite the first and tracing the second triangle also in a clockwise direction. The banishing hexagrams are done in a similar fashion, only that they are traced in a counterclockwise direction rather than a clockwise one, which is all very simple. The only exception to all of this being the solar hexagram, which is extremely complicated. To perform an invoking solar hexagram, you must trace all the planetary hexagrams in order to create a hyperhexagram. The major difficulty with this is that it is extremely difficult to remember your place in drawing so many hexagrams at once during a moment when your mind and body are slipping into magical states of consciousness. This is made more difficult by the Mars-Venus switch, which occurs in between drawing the Mars and Venus hexagrams. At this point in the gesture, you draw the Venus point triangle twice, in between drawing 2 Mars point triangles. And doing so is like making a sudden reversal of direction for your mind and can be extremely jarring. The final set of symbols we must concern ourselves with at this time is that of the unicursal hexagrams, which are entirely unnecessary and not worth the time to learn, save for the unicursal solar hexagram, which we will explain in turn. The major difference between the traditional hexagrams and the unicursal are obviously their shape. What were once two perfectly symmetrical triangles have been replaced by two Star Trek logos caught in the act of scissoring. In exchange for platonic perfection, it is now possible to draw the shape in one single motion, as well as adding a physical point attribution to represent the sun. However, the simplicity of the method has been shattered, as the shape doubles back on itself, therefore turning both clockwise and counterclockwise no matter which direction it is drawn. Crowley himself declaring that the unicursal hexagrams are a total pain in the arse. This confusion is compounded by the fact that there is no official document describing the standardized way to draw these unicursal hexagrams, Crowley having only taught them to a few students privately. The primary source for the tracings of these hexagrams comes from Lon Duquette in his book The Magic of Thelema. The rule of invoking and banishing here is similar to that of the pentagram, where the line flows towards the intended point for invoking and away from the point for banishing. Except in the case of the solar hexagram, which starts from the center moving up and out to invoke and down and out to banish. For our purposes, we will mostly not concern ourselves with the unicursal hexagrams, for as mentioned, they are a redundancy and a pain in the arse. However, one may choose to learn the unicursal solar hexagram, as it alleviates the complexity of the traditional solar hexagram. While discussing the grade signs in chapter 36, it was mentioned the grade signs are both powerful symbols themselves, but can also be strung together into short internal rituals, similar to the middle pillar or Kabbalistic cross. A fine example of this is the analysis of the keyword, which is also the next ritual we are to cover in this course. What follows is literally a ritualized analysis of the word Inri by recitation and performance of attributions of those corresponding lines from the key scale. To begin, stand facing east as usual and recite the following exegesis. I-N-R-I, Yod Nun Resh Yod. Virgo, Isis, Mighty Mother. Scorpio, Apophis, Destroyer. Sol, Osiris, Slain and Risen. Isis, Apophis, Osiris, Yao. Then stand in a T pose and say, the sign of Osiris slain. Take the attitude of the 5-6 grade, saying, the sign of the morning Isis. Then stand in a Y pose and say, the sign of Apophis and Typhon. cross the arms over the chest, becoming like a caduceus, the sign of Osiris risen. Then extend the arms again, crossing them again, saying, "Lux, the light of the cross." Building upon the analysis of the keyword, we finally arrive at the lesser invoking ritual of the hexagram, combining several of the ritual elements that we have recently discussed. The lesser hexagram is the first of our level 2 rituals, generally never performed by itself without accompaniment from a level 1 ritual, such as any of the various variations on the lesser pentagram. Unlike the banishing pentagrams, which use many god names in the quarters, the LIRH only requires one god name, Ararita. This is perhaps a trade-off in complexity for ease of memorization's sake, where the pentagram ritual uses one sigil and many names. The hexagram uses one name and many sigils. The word Ararita is a word of Kabbalistic notericon for the phrase, "One is his beginning, one his individuality, his permutation is one." To perform the prescribed method of the LIRH, first ritually bathe, saying the Aspergus Me, and then dress for the ritual, saying the Per Sanctum Mysterium. Go into your ritual space and stand facing east, and perform the Kabbalistic cross, followed by the lesser banishing pentagram. Follow this with the analysis of the keyword. At this point, still facing east, we begin the lesser hexagram by drawing the invoking hexagram of fire and vibrating the name Ararita. Next, turning to the south, forming the earth hexagram and vibrating the name Ararita. Then, in the west, forming the air hexagram and vibrating the name Ararita. Lastly, turning to the north and projecting the water hexagram and vibrating the name Ararita. Complete the circle by returning to the east and close the ritual with a reprise of the analysis of the keyword. Similar to the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, the lesser invoking ritual hexagram is not without its variants, most popularly the star sapphire, which is a perfect example of why you should always read the footnotes. Footnotes are particularly important while reading the works of Aleister Crowley for two reasons. One, the man makes more cross-references to himself than the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Two, you will miss out on all the good sex jokes. In the case of the star sapphire, both of these factors apply, as sometimes when Crowley mentions a hexagram, he means this.
Other times he means this, but most often he means this. To begin our education on the star sapphire, we must turn to the Book of Lies. However, rather than opening our book to chapter 36, which contains the ritual, we must first go to chapter 69, wherein the secret of the ritual is revealed. And we quote at length, "The way to suck seed and the way to suck eggs." This is the holy hexagram. Plunge from the height, O God, and interlock with man. Plunge from the height, O man, and interlock with beast. The red triangle is the descending tongue of grace. The blue triangle is the ascending tongue of prayer. This interchange, the double gift of tongues, the double word of power, abrahadabra, is the sign of the great work. For the great work is accomplished in silence. And behold, is not that word equal to Heth, that is Cancer, whose sigil is 6-9? This work also eats up itself, accomplishes its own end, nourishes the worker, leaves no seed, is perfect in itself. Little children, love one another. And while all this is rather abstract and poetic, its meaning becomes clear upon reading the commentary to this chapter that he is specifically referring to the sex act commonly represented by this sigil. To perform this ritual alone, ignoring the secret hidden doctrine, one would stand facing east as usual, having prepared the magic wand and cup of holy water or wine, and give the Lux signs. Proceeding then to draw the invoking unicursal solar hexagram in the quarters, saying Pater et Mater unus dies ararita in the east, Mater et Filius unus dies ararita in the south, Filius et Filia unus dies ararita in the west, and Filia et Pater unus dies ararita in the north. And then return to the center and make the rose cross, which is similar to the Kabbalistic cross, only rather than touching the forehead, a circle is drawn around the head, resulting in the shape of an ankh rather than that of a cross, saying Ararita, 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 and would then drink of the sacrament, using it also to anoint the altar, and say, Omnia in duos, duo in unum, unus in nihil, haec nec quator nec omnia nec duo nec unus nec nihil sunt. Gloria Patri et Matri et Filio et Filiae et Spiritui Sancto externo et Spiritui Sancto interno, ut erat est eret in saecula saeculorum sexen uno per nomen septemen uno ararita. Then close the ritual with a reprise of the Lux signs. However, if such a person were to exist who would want to perform this ritual in its complete sense, having all the secret teachings incorporated, one will need to find a consensual partner. And on that note, with that homework assigned, we will leave the breakdown of the complete ritual of the Star Sapphire until the next chapter.
Hey everyone, it's Chasko, the lovable, memeable, other-gendered version of the genderless Yurukyara.
It's just Chester with a bow on its head.
Back in chapter 18, we issued a disclaimer warning that this show will eventually cover adult topics such as sex magic. And as such, we reiterate this disclaimer at this time, as this chapter does indeed describe a sex magic ritual in the Thelemic tradition. Obviously, we do not condone, prescribe, or recommend any unconsensual, unlawful, or uncomfortable sex acts and present this here merely for historical, literary, and educational purposes. We now present the Star Sapphire as it was intended, with the secret sexual doctrines included. This ritual requires two people, the magician, masculine, and the assistant, feminine. These people can be of any combination of genders, assuming they have agreed to play the symbolic role of the gendered assignments in this ritual, and assuming they have appendages and or orifices that they have agreed to designate as the magic rod and mystic rose. To begin, clean and dress as mentioned in chapters 1, 2, and 3, then face east as usual. It would then be appropriate to perform the Star Ruby as opposed to the standard banishing pentagram. The practitioners will then make the Nox signs, omitting the sign of Isis rejoicing. This action resembles the removing of robes, and as such, removing the ritual robes would be convenient at this time. They will then form the holy hexagram, which is to be interpreted as performing the sex act commonly referred to by this sigil, in the four quarters, starting in the east and going clockwise around the circle, giving the orations as given in the text. When the circle has been completed, the practitioners will come to the center and form the rose cross, which in this instance is to be interpreted as inserting the rod into the rose, whilst saying Ararita, Ararita, Ararita. It is said that then Set will appear in the circle, probably indicating that the snake will shoot forth venom. The magician is then instructed to drink of this sacrament and to communicate the same sacrament onto the assistant. He will then give the final oration of the ritual before closing, giving the Lux signs. The sign of Isis rejoicing is implied to occur much later after the ritual, as the pose resembles a mother holding a child.
Recording. I also have to pee. Oh, fuck, smoke shifting again. Yes, it is. Because the rich people are going to burn it down and then fucking blame it on the poor people.
In business, a 60-story resort called Harlem Nights is being proposed for the historic West Side.
That's right, a self-described crazy developer based in Beverly Hills, California. Shlomo Mari owns the nearly 2-acre site. The project calls for a 687-foot tall tower that will include hotel rooms, residential units, casino space, a theater, retail shops, and more.
Having completed our work with the lesser type rituals, it is time to move on to the greater type rituals, beginning, of course, with the greater banishing ritual of the pentagram. As previously mentioned, the lesser banishing is generally sufficient to banish any entities of any wavelength, making a greater banishing completely unnecessary. However, there may be some odd instance where an entity refuses banishment by this method due to rank or attachment. It is at this point that a more powerful and or more specific banishing ritual may become required. Where the lesser banishing is a general banishment of the earth element and should be good enough in most cases, the greater banishing ritual applies all of the specific elemental pentagrams to banish all of the elements in turn. As our next several rituals might be considered greater invocations, it may be handy to have a greater banishing available for emergencies. As usual, the pentagrams in this ritual can also be flipped to invoking pentagrams to result in a greater invoking pentagram ritual. More on this when we discuss Liber Reguli and Liber Samech. To perform the greater pentagram, first cleanse and dress, coming into the ritual space and facing east as usual, and perform the Kabbalistic cross. Make the banishing pentagram of spirit active, vibrating the name Ayah, and make the sign of rending the veil. Make the banishing pentagram of air, vibrating the name Yehovah, and give the sign of air. In the south, make the banishing pentagram of spirit active, vibrating the name Ayah, making the sign of rending the veil, and then give the banishing pentagram of fire, vibrating the name Elohim, giving the sign of fire. Going to the west, make the banishing pentagram of spirit passive, vibrating the name Agla, making the sign of closing the veil. Give the banishing pentagram of water, vibrating the name El, and give the sign of water. Continuing in the north, make the banishing pentagram of spirit passive again, and vibrate the name Agla. giving the sign of closing the veil. Make the banishing pentagram of earth, vibrating the name Adonai, and give the sign of earth. Finish by coming round to the east and close with the Kabbalistic cross. If you have the luxury of knowing the identity or disposition of the spirit you are working with, this ritual can also be tailored to those specific needs, eliminating any unnecessary signs to maximize energy direction.
It's time for the show. Here we go again.
Before we proceed to the supreme tier rituals, which will mostly appear to be variations on the greater pentagram, we will complete the exploration of the greater gram rituals by exploring the suggestions for the greater hexagram ritual, which, like all gram rituals, can be invoking or banishing depending on how you draw the grams. It may surprise the student based on the many complex dance steps thus far that the greater hexagram has no official ritual. This is due to the fact that any performance of the greater hexagram ritual must be customized to the specific situation of its use. To this end, we must first learn something about reading astrology charts. Where a topographical map is oriented north, an astrology chart is oriented south, with the left side of the page representing the sun's rising in the east. First, the planetary or zodiacal powers to be worked with must be chosen by the practitioner, and a time that the ritual will be performed is decided. The practitioner will then construct an astrology chart for the time and location of the ritual. Using the chart as an analog for the magic circle, the direction of the planet will be determined. The practitioner will also research and prepare the appropriate god names for the powers involved, as well as any other appropriate ritual components such as grade signs or numbered knocks. The practitioner will also rehearse, memorize, or compose a more lengthy and poetic invocation of the desired power, incorporating any other relevant symbolism verbally possible. Slightly before the appointed time, the magician should bathe and dress as usual, facing east, and performing a lesser or greater pentagram banishment, and potentially a lesser hexagram invocation of the specific elemental power linked to the desired planet if working with a zodiacal power. This preamble should be timed and scripted so it ends at the appropriate time for the planet to be aligned with the predetermined location. The practitioner will then turn in the direction of the planet in question or zodiacal constellation if applicable. They will then perform the numbered knocks and vibrate or give the exegesis of the name Ararita. At this point, they will draw the corresponding hexagram in the actual direction of the planet or star, vibrating the appropriate god names. They will then give the slightly longer and more poetic invocation, giving any other sigils or signs that are required. With all this complete, the magician will then declare that the power has been duly invoked. Before moving on to the supreme ritual of the pentagram, we must briefly stop to discuss the Enochian method, as the supreme ritual requires the use of god names from that system. In the 16th century in England, the court astrologer Dr. John Dee was obsessed with the mystery of the Sigillum Dei, a symbol from the Liber Juratus attributed to Honorius, which claims to give the magician power and knowledge to control all angels and elements. In order to decode the secrets of the sigil, he hired a scryer and notorious scumbag named Edward Kelly, and together, in an attempt to decode the sigillum, instead accidentally discovered the Enochian system of magic. The Enochian system required 5 copies of the sigilla to be constructed, 4 placed under the legs of the table and 1 upon the table to support the showstone, which must have come as quite the surprise to John Dee, as the symbol he had held in such high regard for so long had suddenly been relegated to being little more than a drink coaster to prevent the legs of the table from scratching the hardwood floors. It was then that the angels dictated the construction of an ornate table and 7 metal tablets, which would then be decoded through the use of angelic algorithms to result in 5 tablets which had the power to evoke and control the angels of any of the classical elements. These 5 tablets would consist of 4 large tablets for the base elements and 1 smaller tablet for the element of spirit. Each tablet contains the names of angels arranged into giant word searches, and the system gives the rules to call upon any angel depicted in the tablet, ranging from the large and abstract to the subtle and fine, by use of its subangles and hierarchies. There is also the matter of the Enochian calls and of the 30 aethers, which are used to activate different parts of the tablets during their use. However, that is a slightly more advanced topic reserved for a later chapter. wicked past, the horrors that I have unleashed. The mystical seal has been broken. The city sleeps, unaware of the grim dangers that are rising. In the Stygian, unlit streets of this place, the crawling evil appears. The sunless dragon stirs within, bound and sealed within my blood. Another bleak day is about to dawn.
It's still raining outside. The lonely rain of my dark heart. No one can protect the city except for me. For I am Characto Originalis, the dark vigilante of revenge. As I wander through the uber-dark landscape of darkness in my angsty loneliness. Time to enact the ritual. Come to me, the sunless dragon. Oh.
KCX, CU, 7-6 on the
Having now discussed the Enochian component, we may proceed to introduce the first of our variants on the Greater Pentagram ritual with the introduction of the Supreme Invoking Ritual of the Pentagram. The Supreme Ritual is nearly identical to a Greater Invoking Pentagram ritual, save for the addition of 8 Enochian names, 2 in each quarter, which are said to govern those elements and element-flavored spirits. Of course, to begin, we proceed with the normal steps of cleansing, bathing, and addressing, arriving at the ritual space and facing east to perform a banishing pentagram. Then, still facing east, perform the Kabbalistic cross. Make the invoking pentagram for spirit active and vibrate the name Exab. Vibrate a higher whilst charging the pentagram. Make the sign of rending the veil. Then make the invoking pentagram of air visualized in yellow light, vibrating the name Oro Iba Azodpi while drawing the pentagram. Vibrate the name Yahweh while charging the pentagram and give the sign of Shu. Pivot to the south. Make the invoking pentagram for spirit active, vibrating Bitam while drawing the pentagram. Vibrate a higher while charging and give the sign of rending the veil. Make the invoking pentagram of fire visualized in red light. Vibrate Oip Tia Pedote while drawing the pentagram. Vibrate Elohim and give the sign of Thermaeth Neith. Move clockwise to the west. Make the invoking pentagram for spirit active, vibrating Hekomah. Vibrate Agla. Make the sign of closing the veil. Make the invoking pentagram of water visualized in blue light, vibrating the name Emper Solgaiol while drawing the pentagram, and El while charging it, giving the sign of Oromoth. Continue to the north. Make the invoking pentagram for spirit passive, vibrating Nanta. Charge by vibrating Agla. Close the veil. Make the invoking pentagram of earth visualized in green light. Vibrate Imordial Hektigar while drawing the pentagram, and Adonai while charging. Give the sign of set fighting. Complete the circle by coming back round to the east, returning to center. Invoke the 4 archangels and perform the Kabbalistic cross as in the lesser ritual of the pentagram. Having now discussed a selection of various invoking and banishing rituals, some context to their usage would seem prudent before we proceed with further variations on the greater pentagram. The first thing to notice is that with the exception of the lesser banishing pentagram, which is perfect in itself, none of these rituals exists in a vacuum and are generally speaking used as components in a larger ceremony. Understanding the general outline of one of these ceremonies will be useful in making your own combinations and variations to create ceremonies that are customized to meet your specific needs. As usual, it is normal to begin with a general cleansing of the space, followed by a cleansing of the self, as well as the donning of any holy vestiges and or any other preparation of the ritual space or physical spell components. The ceremony truly begins with an initial subtle changing of the mind to magic time, such as the Kabbalistic cross, followed by a simple banishing such as the LBRP. This is then generally followed by an LBRH if more banishing is required to reach higher levels of holy entities, or an LIRH to invest the invocateur with general magical power and authority to command lower levels of holy entities. The practitioner might then use a greater invoking pentagram or hexagram to invoke elemental or planetary forces, or both in combination to invoke zodiacal forces. At this point, a long-form oration is given to invoke the specific entity that the operator has chosen to work with,
calling it by name and or titles, and giving a description of its attributes and appearance, which should continue until the practitioner determines that the entity has been duly invoked. At this point, the demands are made, a sigil is presented or charged, or a symbolic action is performed to describe the will to be enacted or the desired outcome to be achieved. When the business with the spirits has been completed, the ritual is closed with an appropriate banishing, which might be as simple as a lesser banishing ritual, or as complicated as performing multiple specific banishing rituals, depending on the severity of the situation. However, it is important to note that there are certain instances, such as in the case of charging objects to infuse them with magic power, that a hard banishing, such as the ones we have previously discussed, might be considered undesirable to the operation. It is therefore helpful to have a soft banishing on hand for such occasions where it may seem rude to slam a spiritual door in the face of a spirit who is taking time out of their busy schedule to help you. For this, we present the license to depart as an alternative soft banishing for these situations. In giving the license to depart in open conversation with a spiritual entity, it may be best to offer said license to depart in a more organic fashion, telling them conversationally after your dealings that our business has concluded and it would be wise to leave the area now, as you are no longer bound here, and as I am about to do a banishing ritual, you might not want to be around when that happens. However, for those of you who wish to do things by the book, or are otherwise too formal or uncreative to write your own, I quote at length from the Goetia of Crowley Mothers, "O thou spirit, because thou hast diligently answered unto my demands, and hast been very ready and willing to come at my call, I do here license thee to depart unto thy proper place, without causing harm or danger unto man or beast. Depart then, I say, and be thou very ready to come at my call, being duly exercised and conjured by the sacred rites of magic. I charge thee to withdraw peaceably and quietly, and the peace of God be ever continued between thee and me. Amen."